This might be the most amazing title match in all of PBA history. A major title was on the line, the US Open. What should have been a routine shot turned into absolute disaster, and it's an excellent example of just what pressure can do to even the best in any sport. Even watching this back now, it's still incredible to watch, and in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what happened and talk about whether this was simply a bad miss or whether it was pure pressure. I am of course talking about the 2011 US Open. The US Open is always that extra bit special because it's the hardest major of them all. It's designed to be a real test and a grind for the players. There really is no room for error, and even the tiniest of mistakes will be punished. This is important because after competing on such tough and demanding conditions all week, it really can grind a player down mentally. For those who have made the TV show, they then have the added pressure of performing on these conditions on television and trying to win one of the most coveted events in bowling. The 68th edition of the US Open was held in 2011 in North Brunswick, New Jersey. 5 players had battled it out to make the telecast. They were Bill O'Neill, Ryan Schaefer, Mika Koivuniemi, Tommy Jones and Norm Duke. Schaefer won his match against Bill O'Neill that saw O'Neill blow a huge lead and then lose the match after getting a split in the 10th frame. That's a great example of what can happen at the US Open. O'Neill was up by 46 pins after 6 and then had a massive collapse, while Schaefer just plugged along close frames and then jumped in on the 10th frame to mean that O'Neill needed a mark, but a mark is no easy feat on the US Open oil pattern. After staging a miraculous comeback, Schaefer played Mika and the scoring pace was pretty decent. Both players were striking until Schaefer left a pocket 7-10 in frame 8. Mika did enough to get the win and the final score was 236 to 222, so a decent showing from both players in that match. Then Mika went on to play 2-seed Tommy Jones. Now Mika had already won a major just a month before, the Tournament of Champions, and he was also the first player in PBA history to make all 4 telecasts in a major in the same season. The lanes started to get tougher, and in this match Jones had 2 splits in 3 frames, although one was a bit unfortunate, leaving the 4-9. Jones couldn't really get comfortable, and you heard him talking to the ball rep saying that he really only felt he had one ball that he could use, and yeah, just looked a little bit lost at times out there as for what to do, and things wouldn't improve for him, and Mika easily won this match to set up a very intriguing final with 1 seed Norm Duke. These two had history, as Duke had beat Mika in the 2008 US Open when Duke made the bucket in the 10th to win the title. He'd also beaten Mika in 2 other title matches, one in 2006 and the other in 2003. This match really came down to grinding out the frames and making spares. Both players were doing that well, but towards the end of the match, Mika found something and had 3 in a row in the 7th, 8th and 9th frames to take a 24-pin lead. Norm responded well though and did all he could, striking in the 9th and then 3 times in the 10th. This reduced the lead to 4 and meant that Mika needed a 16-pin fill to win. Like we saw with Bill O'Neill though, on this pattern, that is not guaranteed by any means. Mika made a pretty good shot here that left a 10-pin. It just didn't quite have the drive to take out the 10. It meant he had to spare. For a pro, this is essentially a routine shot. I think everybody, including Norm Duke, expected him to make this, but let's watch what happened.
Single pin spare, misses it! He missed it! And Duke has won the US Open.
Now, first off, let's say it how it is. This was nothing else but pure pressure taking over. You can see from how he releases it that it has no chance of making the spare. Let's compare it to a previous 10-pin made in this match, and you can quite clearly see the difference. You can see the way he pushes it out, and that's something that really just comes from nerves and tension. Now, the important thing to note here is that this has nothing to do with skill level in my opinion, and I will explain what I mean because I think this is an important point that we can build on. Some might falsely believe that Mika isn't a particularly good spare shooter, or that maybe he just made a bad shot. Well no, it's pressure. Simple as that. And what's fascinating is how pressure can affect everybody. Another good example is when Del Bader Jr. threw a gutter ball when he needed just 7 pins to win the title. He did the same sort of thing and almost overthrew it and missed to the right. And that's what happened here. And what's important to look at is how pressure affects you as a player. You can be a 90 to 95% single pin spare shooter, but what's important is the context of when you make the majority of your spares and what situations you miss them. When are you missing your single pins? Is it random? Is it on certain lane conditions, certain times of the match? You could be a 90% spare shooter overall, but a 40% spare shooter during clutch situations. I think that it's a very important aspect to analyze when it comes to our own games. Some players track their conversion rates, but I think it's actually far more important to track when you're missing, because if you can spot a pattern, you can take steps to improve. In this situation, the stakes were so high, and Mika had endured a very tough telecast and an extremely tough week of bowling. All it takes is for one lapse in concentration, one slight awry shot, and you can pay a big price. Even the best in the world have made very bad shots under pressure, but if you look at the positive side, Mika did make a good first shot. If you put 100 non-pros in this situation, how many would make that shot with that much riding on the line? I mean, even if you put 100 pros, how many would actually make it? There would be quite a few who would fail. It's the ability to do what you know you can do, regardless of the circumstances. And I have to say at this point that we have seen Mika perform under pressure. You don't become a multiple major champion by regularly making these kind of mistakes. Mika established himself as one of the best international players, but also one of the best players on the PBA tour, because he was able, on the whole, throughout his career to handle these pressure moments. And that is what I think made this even more shocking. Nobody expected this from Mika. And even though he missed this, it doesn't take away everything else he's done. It doesn't take a lot for fans to claim that a player is a choker who is bad under pressure, but they seem to forget all the other times that player has performed under extreme pressure. And another angle to look at is that people will say Mika threw this one away, but you could say that Norm Duke won it. Because after that strike from Mika in the 9th, it wasn't looking good. Norm was in a must-strike situation, but he stepped up and struck to create that situation and that pressure on Mika. So yes, it's easy to say, well, Mika threw it away, but in actual fact, Norm Duke also deservedly won the title because he performed when it mattered most, and Mika on that occasion didn't. It came down to the end of the match and one player simply performed better than the other. That's just bowling. Randy in commentary said himself that Mika is a very good spare shooter, and to be honest, at the level he reached, you have to be. He's a multiple major winner and he got there by making key shots and good spares at the right time. But it's so interesting to see how pressure can take even the best by surprise. And you do have to feel so sorry for him, as you can see what a heartbreaking moment it was. But let's look at how Mika responded next, because that shows us what sort of player he is. This kind of miss could really damage and potentially end a player's career. Many would never be able to fully get over it. Again, using the Del Bader Jr. example, he showed how strong his mental game was, because just 2 weeks after he threw that gutter ball, he came back and won a title, and then went on to win 4 titles that year. What then happened to Mika? Well, the following year he won 2 titles. In 2012, the Japan Cup and the Qatar Open. 2013, he won the Vienna Open. And then in 2014, the Bullmaster Open and then the Viper Championship. It's interesting that afterwards he won 4 titles internationally, but then he did come back and win again in the US. and that win at the Viper would be his last title on the main tour, but it shows that he didn't let this miss at the US Open derail his career. He might not have won another major, but he still won 5 more titles, and that's a testament to his ability and also his mental game. Like I said, many other players probably would have let that define their careers. Mika did not. Mika has won 2 titles on the PBA 50 Tour, and it's great to see him back competing again as he won his second in 2025. It's really incredible that a telecast that happened, nearly 15 years ago, is still so fantastic to watch. And as I said, I think a lot of that was just the pure shock of this happening in that situation with Mika, who you just did not expect that to come from him. This was one of the craziest and most fascinating and interesting title matches to watch, and one of my favorites. And so that will bring us to an end of this video. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and if you have, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any other suggestions for other telecasts that you'd like me to break down, then please let me know in the comment section below. Well, that is going to do it from me for today, and as always, thank you bowling fans, and see you all next time.